Good evening, I'm Dennis Ward, and this is Face to Face. Our guest this week is Anishinaabe filmmaker and producer Lisa Meeches. Over the past 4 decades, Meeches has produced countless acclaimed films and television programs, including The Sharing Circle, Ice Road Truckers, TP Tales, Taken, and many more. Lisa has also been critical to the success of the Manitowabe Festival in Winnipeg, an annual gathering that celebrates Indigenous culture and heritage to unify, educate, and inspire. She is a member of the Order of Canada and the Order of Manitoba. Lisa, welcome to the show. I know you're super busy this month, so appreciate you taking the time for us.
Thank you so much for having me and fitting me into the schedule. I'm really excited about this month.
It is busy, and we're going to get to a bunch of the things you have going on this month, but you know, you've done so much over the years that it was hard when putting together the questions to think of where to start. So maybe we'll start at the beginning, and when you first knew that you wanted to be a visual storyteller.
Well, I've always known storytelling was in our blood. I grew up around storytellers and knowledge keepers most of my life, and being surrounded around those types of people, naturally you pick up story, right? And to pick up story in this medium, for me as a young girl watching TV, it seemed like it was out of my reach. But I had hoped and dreamed big. And then I also knew that, you know, having disciplined and principled parents, you have to ensure that you follow through, and having the opportunity to be around these traditional people ensures that you do good on that covenant that you make. And so coming from that type of responsibility in my family, you know, it's imperative that you do stand for your community. And so for me, it's always been imperative that storytelling has been the haven and the basis of everything that we do, which is, you know, I think why documentary filmmaking was so important. Because as a bundle carrier and a person that comes from a very principled family, it's not your place to have judgment or have a say in what the community, how they should behave or how they should react. But you're there to talk about how can they get this across so that it's easier for people to understand and make it digestible so that it's safe for you know, the end user's ears and their eyes. Because we know that, you know, when we bring in these types of ceremonies into the TV world, we have to understand that it's not just for show. So when I was given the opportunity to create that first TV series, I wanted to make sure that it was something that I knew I could commit to long time for the community and within the community, knowing that I couldn't have an opinion. I had to remain unbiased, and that's still my position today.
Long time indeed. Going to talk about the Sharing Circle, which you're referring to here, but just quickly, I guess, you know, you started out in news though, right? Back in the mid-'80s or so. What was that like, being one of the few Indigenous women, for sure, in news at that time?
It was, I'm not going to lie, it was intimidating, but I knew around Brandon, which is where I used to do news, I knew the Dakota communities and Ojibwe communities were watching. And I knew that they were watching specifically our newscast for me, because it gave them hope and it gave them inspiration. And we started doing live hits and the ratings continued to crawl up. And so one day the executives came in, sat with me, and they said, since you've started, we noticed that the BBMs are changing. That's the measurement that they used to use back in the day. Mm-hmm. And so they correlated to my live hits. So we tried a couple of other long stories, longer form stories, and again, the ratings continued to climb. So they offered me a show of my very own, and I took that back to ceremony to my grandfather and my grandparents on the res. And then he said to me, he didn't say congratulations, he says, you're going to be responsible for people's half hour every Sunday night. What are you going to do with that, and how are you going to earn that right? And so I thought, that's not what I wanted to hear. But nonetheless, you know, I was up for the task. So he put me on a 4-day fast behind his house to earn the right to tell people stories. And that's the philosophy that we continued within the company. But for sure on Sharing Circle, it has been our saving grace to earn the right to tell people's stories or to share people's testimonies, whatever the subject matter was and whatever we were dealing with. And back then, we were not dealing with what we're dealing with today. There was subtle discussions of residential school, missing and murdered. We were on the cusp of something really, really big. And I didn't know how to put my finger on it because it was too big for me. And so I had the opportunity to stay close to the community level and really stay intact with the stories and feeling what the people were feeling. And that encompassed the creation of the Sharing Circle. You know, I've had a few co-hosts over the years, Jim Compton, Tina Keeper, Ted Nolan, a few others, and it's been a blast. Like, that series was so much fun because at the time we had full editorial control, right? And then when the broadcast company grew, the market grew for me as well, which meant we could move to bigger markets out west.
Right.
And which is how I learned to work within the rules of the CRTC.
As a young lad growing up on the prairies, CKX and MTN were super important. You know, long time show, years and years, the longest running, I believe. Any episodes stick out for you over that time?
Geez. You know, back in the day, I'd love going to powwows to tell those types of stories because that's my world, right? I'm a powwow person. I come from a powwow family and a powwow community, and those are always my favorite because I knew to film them in such a way where it could be taught as a storytelling technique was really something new for me and challenged me at the time because I knew powwow inside and out, and I still know powwow inside and out. And as a competitor and a fancy shawl dancer, I just wanted to be there. So I had to find a way to marry the two worlds. So every season I would always do 2 or 3 episodes on powwows and what that would mean to us and how the powwow was a safe recovery for relearning our ways and a safe recovery for creating that even playing field. Because imagine those dancers being able to dance true to their spirit in that very moment. And that's something that we weren't allowed to do and still, in some cases, still aren't, you know. And so that speaks to the arts and culture disciplines that are desperately needed on the reserve level.
You were honored by the Inspire Awards in 2007. Sharing Circle was still going strong. And you talked about the first season when people that you spoke to were afraid of the camera, and that, you know, by 2007, there were so many stories that needed to be shared that there was a need for a whole network. And that really stuck with me. Why do you think people were afraid to speak at that time, and what changed that?
I think it was the fact that with the camera on their face, it meant a different level of truth. And that really made people nervous and you know, and the trust level needed to be there. So I would always pass tobacco. And my crew were always trained in the passing of tobacco. And to ensure that that trust would always be invoked first. And so passing of that tobacco represented the truth. I'm going to ask you the truth. You got to tell me the truth back. And so that was how that tobacco, passing of that tobacco was understood. And even back then, you know, all those years ago, we knew that this was going to come back. And so, you know, that passing of tobacco and relying on those ancestral ways of storytelling and ensuring that knowledge is being passed down, that's true in storytelling as well. My biggest sigh of relief was when I got the okay from my grandfather after my 4-day fast for the sharing circle. And he says, I see your camera is like your bundle now. What you do is medicine. And for me, that's good enough. You don't have to stay home and collect the medicines like the rest of, you know, your cousins. You can do your work, and you don't have to feel guilty about leaving the community. And when I heard that, I felt it was okay to reach outside of Long Plain and outside of Treaty 1 territory and even outside of Canada.
Great stuff, Lisa. We just have to step aside for a quick break, and then we'll continue the conversation here on Face to Face with Lisa Meeches. Stick around. Welcome back to Face. Our guest this week is filmmaker and producer Lisa Meeches. And Lisa, aside from the sharing circle, I think a lot of people would also, you know, viewers of APTN recognize you as the host of Taken. How did that series come to be, and why was that such an important project?
You know, Dennis, I always found myself arm's length from the missing and murdered families and arm's length from the issue itself. And something traumatic happened to me with my late sister. She was taken one time, and we found her. And then when I found out that I was having a daughter, I was pregnant with a daughter, I went back to that day. And I went back to when I was a young woman finding my way in this city. And I became scared, I became frightened for her, even though she wasn't even born yet. And so I called up my business partners, and I was like having these worries, and I was crying, and I said, how can we save her life before she's born? I don't know what to do. And I said, all I know is that this place isn't safe for our women and our girls anymore. And then we came up with this idea of, you know, of how to, like other missing and murdered shows and the genre itself, and we really dove into it. We had no development money, just a fear for Stevie. And then, boom, the money just lined itself up like it was meant to be. And we shot the first show. I was breastfeeding already a week, and we shot the first show. And I was breastfeeding on set, and I would hand her off to my husband, and I knew that we were doing the right thing. So the show was designed out of fear for my daughter. She's going to be 11 next week, and not much has changed in terms of safety for our women in city centers. But we're becoming more proactive and working with the families and taking suggestions from them and how change can happen. And you're seeing the results of those discussions. And so whether it was because of Taken or the families coming together and trusting us to share their testimonies, because I wanted to know what these women were doing the last time anyone saw them walking, talking, living, breathing, laughing. And we needed to reenact that so their families could have that. But in the beginning of the show, we fall in love with them as babies. We get to meet them as babies, as young children growing up in their home communities. And then we find out quickly what happens to them, in hopes that somehow, some way, someone will wake up and remember, you know, what happened to our women, what happened in the last series. It was both men and women and boys and girls. And, you know, and I really, really believe that Taken has done what it's meant to do, and there's hopes and renewing it. And so we're talking about it. We're in discussions now. But I really believe that my girl really woke me up inside and put me in the place of all of those other families. And keep in mind, Dennis, within that first year of delivery, I had a major stroke.
Right.
And so now I got to know what it was like for our women to have their final breaths, to not know what it's like if you're going to make it. Now I had to earn that too. And so for me, that's my takeaway. You know, it kind of correlated between Stevie and the series and the stroke and where we've gone and where we're going now. And so it's been a big learning curve for me, and, you know, thankful for the APTN listeners and watchers, you know, for always, you know, sending their prayers. We come from such prayerful people, and I knew we can count on them.
Of course, spokesperson for the Heart and Stroke Foundation as well. Lisa, you know, you've worked on projects that have won big awards in Hollywood, projects nominated for Canadian Screen Awards here, ones that I imagine are pretty personal to you. But out of all these projects over the years, which ones, I guess, do you hold closest to your heart?
I think the feature film We Were Children, on many levels, because it was, you know, I wasn't sure if that was the right thing to do at the time, if we were ready to open up that can of worms with our survivors, because at that time, Eagle Vision was asked to retain testimonies from the east to the west coast, the north. And from all of those things that we heard, it was unbelievable. You know, it changed my world, it changed my life in such a way where I knew that we had to expedite some kind of training. But it was We Were Children that really changed. Before then, I knew stuff was happening. I knew stuff happened to our people. And when I heard what I heard from sharing and listening to testimony, I knew that something big was going to come out of this, and we're still talking about it, and different ways now. You know, it's mentioned in different series. You know, it's opened up discussions in spaces where we never ever thought we could talk about these things. But I'm really proud of our community for how they held on to these testimonies and their own stories, and found the resiliency and strength to hold on to them long enough for us filmmakers to catch up. And now you're seeing all these amazing stories, just, you know, being born from a very, very scary time in our people's history. And we're still seeing the aftermath. You know, you don't have to walk too far down Portage Avenue to see what has happened to our people. And so my challenge for other filmmakers is to continue doing what we need to do, to continue ensuring that it's our narrative that we're sharing, but also, you know, don't take it personal if things don't always get greenlit in your way. For us, as the senior filmmakers, we're always cheering for you. We're always making sure that you have something to produce. And for me, that's a covenant that I will always make to the younger filmmakers, is making sure that we always have room and work for them, and continual training. So we're always working with the unions to make sure that, you know, we're fighting the good fight for our people below the line.
Powerful film indeed, airs here on APTN quite often. Check it out if you haven't, and even if you have, check it out again. Lisa, more to talk about. We just have to step aside for one last quick break, and then we'll continue the conversation here on Face to Face. Welcome back to Face to Face. Our guest this week is filmmaker and producer Lisa Meeches, and so much more. One of the other things that you are, Lisa, is a mentor, and you've been a mentor to so many, including many of us around here as well that work at APTN today. What would be your, advice to those looking to come up in the industry?
Stick with what you know in the beginning. Like I said, don't take things personal if you don't get greenlit or you don't get that first TikTok video or whatever it is, but stay true to your storyline and don't be afraid to collaborate. There's something to be said for really strong collaborations. All my best collaborations have always been with strong co-production partners that are seasoned. And I've been very fortunate to produce my first feature film called Elijah, the story of Elijah Harper, with a couple of guys out of BC, Blake Corbett and Chris Leeson. And they came here many, many years ago. Geez, the first year Manitoba started, we filmed Elijah. And so nearly 20 years ago. And there were so many auditions and so many times that I would give my head a shake. And the funniest story that came from that movie was, at the time they couldn't believe an Indigenous person would be a producer at a budget at that level. And we were going to eat lunch at Craft Services. And the head of Craft Services was telling me to go outside and eat with the extras, where the extras that were playing the chiefs in the movie. And my co-producing partner was standing with me, and he says to the crafty, she's the boss. She's the lead producer on this movie. And he was so embarrassed. And I remember being that aha moment, because that movie went on to win Movie of the Week for the Canadian Screen Awards. At the time, it was the Geminis. And I couldn't believe, it just catapulted my career. But before then, it was the movie Capote with Truman, right, or about Truman Capote's book that really made big waves within the company, where script after script was being sent. And so I'm always grateful for those opportunities. And today you see a lot of collabs happening with Indigenous producers and other senior producers, and I think that's great. So much work for our people in Manitoba and just within the industry altogether. Now I can finally say to my young interns, you can be anything you want to be in TV and film, anything. Imagine that.
Yeah. Lisa, so much we didn't get to. One of those things being that, the industry is changing so much, but one thing that people keep calling for is more people in higher places like the one that you're in. Thanks so much for doing the show this week. We could have done 2 episodes. I have the pleasure of introducing you in a couple of days at Vision Quest, so real pleased to have you with us.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
And that is all the time we have for Face to Face this week. I'm Dennis Ward. We'll see you back here in 7 days.